here's our next chapter on population. That's right. All we're going to do is talk about population and its impact on the world. Who knew a whole chapter could be dedicated to this? Well, let's get it started. Here's where we're first going to start. Where's the world's population distributed? While I'm talking about this, I want you to really think about site and situation and how site and situation play a role into where the world's population is distributed. Let's get it going here. All right, so first off, population and demography. All right, so what is demography? Well, it's the analysis of how people are distributed by. All right, and they use age, gender, occupation, fertility, health, you name it. They probably have a map for it. All right, so we're going to focus on a lot of different maps. As you can see here, this map is people over the age of 65 and where they are concentrated. All right, you can see and view that if you'd like. There are so many other maps. We will talk about them more in class. Let's keep going here. All right, so here's some of the issues regarding population that we're going to cover in this unit. All right, climate change and pollution is one. Inadequate housing and inadequate food supply are also two items that kind of go hand in hand with overpopulation. Also the spread of diseases, right, like the Black Plague, like HIV and the flu. We'll talk about that. And last but not least, economic growth. Does population help or does it hurt economic growth? We're going to get into all that, all right? But we're going to start here. And if you can see on the cartogram to the right here, it's really in four specific areas, right? East Asia, where China is, East Asia, Southeast Asia, and finally Europe. Those are the big population groupings. All right. I also want to note this. While you're reading your textbook, within some of these countries, they actually label where humans have settled. So, for example, in China, the largest concentration of population is near the Pacific coast and by the Huang and Yangtze River. And you could probably apply site and situation to those examples. All right, let's keep going here. So, why do people settle in these four regions? Well, here are some similarities between these four regions. That most people live near an ocean or river. Wonder why? Transportation, perhaps, trading. All right. Also, these regions share the fact that they have relatively flat land with fertile soil. Wonder why? To sustain a population. Also, they have temperate climate. It's not extreme. It's not really, really, really hot, and it's not really, really cold. And most of these regions are in the northern hemisphere. Yes, there are some populations a little bit south of the equator, but for the most part, population concentration is within the northern hemisphere. All right, so just four similarities between these regions. And then we have a term called ecumene. And what that means is, and I'll say it again, ecumene is a portion of Earth's surface permanently occupied by human settlement, right? Say that 10 times fast. So, the examples, Europe, Middle East, Asia, right? Just to name a few. In fact, 75% of the world's population lives on 5% of the Earth's surface. What are we doing with the rest of it? Well, there is a reason for it, all right? But the concentration of population, the 75% of the world living on 5%, goes back to ecumene. So why aren't people settled in every other area of the world? Why are we not using all of the land area? Well, it's for these four different types of land areas. One is something called dry lands. You know it as desert, right? And obviously there's little to no fertile soil. You can't grow anything. If you can't grow anything, you can't sustain a population. This is also an example of extreme conditions. Again, wetlands is another example where there is so much precipitation. If you see the picture to the right here, right? An example of this would be in the interior of South America. There's just so much rain that you can't grow because you're actually drowning what you're growing. Then we have cold lands, and a lot of things don't grow underneath snow. And again, it's an extreme climate. It's very hard to live in such areas. And last but not least, the highlands, another extreme type of climate where it's covered in snow. So these areas are hard to live in. And thus, these areas are not only hard to live in, some of them are hard to get to. And if you know, early settlement was usually near a river where they could trade and you can easily move yourself to another area. All right, and finally, population density. You've heard these three terms before. I'm going to go over them again, and we're going to talk about them for one whole day in class again. All right, you have arithmetic density, which is just the total number of objects divided by the total land area. They usually use population for this. So look, I gave you an example here. The United States population, yes, it's more than 310 million. Let's just use 310 million. And our land area, which doesn't really change, is 9.6 million square kilometers. So what you do is you take the first number, population, or the object, and you divide it by the area in which you are using. Hence, we have about 32 people per square kilometer. Now, that differs among different countries, and we'll talk about that in class. Then you have physiological density, which is the number of people supported by arable or farmland. And then you have, last but not least, agricultural density, which is the number of farmers to the amount of arable land or farmland. All these three densities play a role in how a country can sustain a population. Now, are more developed countries, MDCs, better off than less developed countries, LDCs, because of these three types of density? Does more of a population help the economy? Does it hurt the economy? Well, you know what? We're going to get into all that in the next week or so. All right? That's it. I will see you in class.